This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Time came to actually axe the tax conservative.
Questions orales.
Oral questions.
The honourable member for Wellington, Walton Hills.
Madam Speaker, Statistics Canada just released data showing a sharp decline in per capita GDP last quarter. This is the 6th consecutive quarterly decline. This is a made-in-Canada per capita recession caused by government that stubbornly refuses to listen to everyone from the Bank of Canada to private sector economists. So when will the government start listening to the experts, heed common sense, and start cutting taxes on investment, energy, and income to save Canadians from this collapsing economy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing.
GDP per capita is one measure, and the Conservatives continue to raise it. So let's focus on it for a moment, Madam Speaker. Our country's GDP is in fact growing. On that measure, though, specifically, we exceed GDP per capita by leaps and bounds compared to the UK, to France, and Japan, Madam Speaker. That is World Bank data, and that is IMF data. On the issue of tax cuts, which the Conservatives love to talk about, Madam Speaker, yesterday they had an opportunity to cut taxes for Canadians, all Canadians, and they said no. They showed who they are, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Wellington, Walton Hills.
Madam Speaker, last month, National Bank said GDP per capita has fallen by about 4% cumulatively since 2022, which is unprecedented outside a recession. And now the economy is threatened with 25% tariffs that the Chamber of Commerce says could shrink Canada's GDP by another 2.6%. The bigger decline in GDP would come from this government's policies, not for potential tariffs. That's because of its tax hikes on investment and income. So when will the government reverse course, start cutting taxes on investment and income to save Canadians from this collapsing economy?
The Honourable Ministre.
Madam Speaker, it seems like the member was not in the House yesterday, because actually it's interesting, his question, but the real question that Canadians have in their mind, all those watching, why would the Conservative vote against a tax cut, Madam Speaker? Imagine a tax cut. You know what Canadians are talking about is affordability, affordability, affordability. Yesterday, they had the opportunity to show to Canadians that they are their voice in Ottawa. But what we saw yesterday is that they're the voice of their leader in Ottawa, Madam Speaker, voting against a tax cut at a time where families need support.
The Honourable Member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Madam Speaker, that was a tax cut on consumption, not investment and income. Madam Speaker, U.S. Border Patrol has released alarming data. CBS Boston reported on November 11th that a total of 155 suspects on the terror watch list were encountered at the southern U.S. border in 2024, but double the number were encountered on the northern border and arrested 361. And now Canada is threatened with 25% tariffs because of illegal border crossings. What is this government's plan to protect our borders, our trade, and Canadians from terror?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, our plan is very simple to tackle affordability. That's what we did yesterday, Madam Speaker. We offered a tax cut to Canadians at a time where they need it. But what is shameful and what is on the mind of every Canadian, the question is, why would the Conservative vote against a tax cut? Madam Speaker, I'm sure people are watching at home and they say, they must have been missing something. What's happening to the Conservative? We say, axe the tax, Madam Speaker. Yesterday they had a chance not to do slogan, but to do something for Canadians, and they failed miserably. Madam Speaker, Canadians need a break.
Honourable Député, the Honourable Member for Colonial Country.
After 9 years, we're seeing this NDP Liberal government's economic vandalism in real time with new data from Statistics Canada today. Real GDP per capita fell 0.4% in the third quarter in 2024. Per capita GDP has fallen now for 6 consecutive quarters. This is a made-in-Canada per capita GDP recession caused by the NDP Liberal carbon tax housing crisis and job-killing, investment-killing capital gains tax hike. The Prime Minister doesn't have a plan. Will he get out of the way for a Prime Minister who does?
Yeah! The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing.
Inflation, Madam Speaker, is back to normal levels. Unemployment levels in this country are around historically low levels. That member continues to talk about GDP per capita like all of them do. On that measure specifically, which has been roundly criticized by economists as not presenting a fair economic picture, but let's look at it. We exceed the UK, France, and Japan. And yesterday, they had a chance to vote for a tax cut for Canadians, and what did they do? They did what they always did. They voted on the opposite side. They don't care about the middle class. They don't care about everyday Canadians.
Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, what that member opposite does not want to talk about is that the new GDP data represents the worst standard of living decline in Canada in 40 years. The Canadian dollar is the lowest it's been in 5 years. And more costs to Canadians are on the way with the new U.S. administration wanting to put a 25% tariff on all Canadian exports. The Prime Minister's response? To hike taxes, like the carbon tax, which will be going up on April 1st, which will make the cost of everything go up. The Prime Minister doesn't have a plan. Will he get out of the way for a Prime Minister who does?
Yeah! The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, I think Canadians respect principle, but they have challenges with duplicity. I know that member to be a strong advocate of small businesses in this country. I know that because she herself is a small business owner. In the past 7 days, we've had the Canada carbon rebate apply to small businesses in the terms of thousands of dollars, which is tremendous. Last night, we had a vote in this chamber about axing a tax which reduces the GST on the small businesses that member defends constantly in this chamber. I just don't understand the duplicity when she can't find her conscience and vote in favor of a tax that will help businesses in BC and right around the country.
Honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
While the U.S. economy roars, real GDP per capita in Canada falls. It's a made-in-Canada recession, and these NDP Liberals have presided over the worst standard of living decline in this country in 40 years. Food bank use at records never seen before. Now the United States is going to hit us with a 25% tariff. And what's their plan? It's to raise taxes. This NDP Liberal government is going to raise their job-killing carbon tax. This Prime Minister doesn't have...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, he talks about our relations with the United States. I remember back when I was first elected in 2016, what did we see with the rise of Donald Trump in the United States? We saw a government that was there for Canadians, and we saw a Conservative Party at that time that was telling the government to capitulate, Madam Speaker. Right. We will not do that. We will stand for everyday Canadians, as we always have. On the issue of what happened yesterday, they don't want to talk about it, but let's talk about it. It is very, very critical to note yet again that they turned their back on Canadians. They voted against a tax cut. Years ago, they've done it again. Middle-class tax cuts, they were against them.
Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Let's talk about a record of this failed government that doesn't have a plan to address the 25% tariffs that are going to be imposed by the U.S. government. That is, except for this NDP Liberal Prime Minister to introduce his carbon tax being raised again on April the 1st, along with a host of other taxes. Poverty is up. Food bank use is up.
That's right.
Mortgage costs have doubled. Rent has doubled. If this Prime Minister doesn't have a plan to fix what he has broken, will he get out of the way for a Prime Minister who can fix it?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister for
Madam Speaker, our trade relationship with the U.S. is of utmost importance, and it's a key priority for our government. What Canadians want to know is where the Conservatives were last night with their axe. They did not vote in favour of axing the tax. On this side of the House, Liberal MPs stood strong with Canadian families and voted to axe the GST for 2 months so Canadians can save up to 13% in Ontario. That means prepared food, children's toys, diapers, car seats, board games, puzzles, video games, and other essentials will be much less expensive over the holidays, Mr. Speaker. Why won't the Conservatives stand with Canadian families?
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West, Saskatoon University.
New data has been released, and it's bad. Canadians' economy is on life support. It's so bad that Stats Canada just reported our economy is collapsing. 6 consecutive quarters of GDP per capita decline. The United States is eating our lunch. Their economy last quarter increased by 2.8%. In Canada, 0.3%. Not 3%, 0.3%. Canadians are going broke, and this Prime Minister doesn't have a plan. When will he get out of the way for a Prime Minister that has a plan?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Let's stick to the facts, Madam Speaker. Over 10 years of Stephen Harper, we saw debt to GDP per capita grow by $1,810. Over almost 10 years. After 8 years of this Liberal government, we've seen it grow by over 11,000, Madam Speaker. Not only are we better for economic growth in this country, we're also introducing mechanisms that are really leading to affordability for Canadians, like PEI's new school food program. We introduced one in Ontario last week and PEI this week, Madam Speaker. And just yesterday, every Conservative had an opportunity to vote tax the tax.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon University.
New damning data has been released, confirming the results of 9 years of economic vandalism by the NDP Liberal government. We got the worst decline in living standards in 40 years. Consumer debt has hit an all-time record high, and today we learned the GDP per capita fell again for the 6th straight month. Americans are threatening a 25% tariff, and this Prime Minister doesn't have a plan. When will he get out of the way for a Prime Minister who does?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. The question's actually been answered on a number of occasions, but I want the member to reflect on what happened yesterday. Yeah. Remember the Conservative Party and the leader? They go across Canada. They say, we're going to do you a favor. We're going to axe taxes. For the first time, they get a chance to vote on the issue, Madam Speaker. And what do? They abandon the principles. They demonstrate what hypocrites really look like, and they voted against a tax break for the holiday season, Madam Speaker. Even though during the last campaign, they campaigned in favor of it. How would you define hypocrisy, Madam Speaker?